So we know the defense is better. We talked about it since the end of the regular season on through the performance in the bowl game, that whether you go with the traditional standard statistics, points per game, yards per game, all of that, or even dive into the advanced metrics, the improvement is substantial. It's going from 85th, 90th, 95th type rankings in the country to top 15 to 25 rankings this past season. I would love to know if it's been addressed in regards to what the coaches think the difference is. Is it Grinch? Is it the entire coaching staff? Is it an upgrade in talent? Is it better scheme, attitude, effort, all those things?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of those things put together, Mark. I think it was a little bit of a question mark coming into this season. Sure, they improved in Grinch's, first season in 2019, but we all saw that performance against LSU, and I think nationally the thought was, are they really that much better? To your point, I think they were 89th, 90th, which is, not Oklahoma standards, but certainly much better than they have been over the last few years, prior to that under Mike Stoops. And then, the gigantic leap that they made this year, top 30 overall defense from, 89th, 90th in 2019. I think part of it's the culture. That some of the kids have talked a little bit about the culture, not being something that some of these new kids have to learn. It's something that's embedded in the Oklahoma defense right now. Grinch's culture has manifested itself just in terms of the way they like to play, and I think it was a little bit surprising. I don't know that anyone really knew what to expect last year coming into this COVID season where they didn't have a spring, they didn't have the typical, fall practice that they would. And so to see how much they improved over the course of the year, I think was really impressive. And so I think to your point, it's just a little bit of everything. I think the culture is better. They've definitely had a massive upgrade in talent on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're battling teams like Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson for some of these recruits when they were, previously they were battling some mid-major teams and some, lower end Power 5 teams. So the recruiting, the defensive staff has taken a step up. So I think you put all of those together, that kind of points to, the increase in productivity over, last year to this year. And, this year you look at, how can you get better? Top 30 is great. What do they need to do to get to the top 15? And I think it's one of those from a mentality perspective. Brian Odom talked a little bit about this. Grinch talked about this before, and before the mentality was, kind of last man standing in terms of, okay, I'm the only guy here, so I get to play by default. So kind of the culture is having, a sense of urgency, having, that ability to get on the floor immediately. Get on the court. Get on the field immediately, I should say, and really just having that, different mentality to know exactly what needs, because I think this group as a whole knows that they're the reason that Oklahoma at least hasn't won a playoff game or maybe hasn't won a national championship, over the last 5 years. So I think they certainly understand that sense of urgency, and they seem to have the talent and the depth that really all three levels of the defense to be able to compete for that national championship this year.
That's what separates the playoff teams, Oklahoma included in many respects, with everybody else, even top 15 to 20 teams in the country, is they stack those waves of tremendous athletes at any one position. Therefore, they guard themselves against injuries. They guard themselves against just guys not coming through and living up to the expectations. They guard themselves against guys showing up and not feeling as though they need to try that hard, because you go to a number of programs, even high-level programs, and if you're the only high four-star at the wide receiver position and everybody else is much less talented than you only need to be pushed so much, and you're still probably the best player, even if you're not playing at your best. You're still the best player, you're going to play. But, man, right. You go to some of these schools and some of these depth charts at certain positions, and, man, you better not just be as talented as you are. You better bust your tail and learn the plays and know what you're doing and be disciplined and do all the right things to see playing time.
No, you're absolutely right, Mark. And I think that's a difference, competitive balance with it within the roster, specifically when you talk about the front seven for Oklahoma, which is the strength of the defense. Certainly, you talk to some of the media members and listen to some of the things that they say, and listening to the coaches and players, you get the feeling that this team is very very comfortable, going three deep, both at the defensive line and the linebacker position. There's a lot of talent there that's returning. Certainly, there's Ronnie Perkins that they lost, but outside of that, there's not a lot of loss on the linebacker or the defensive line. So that front seven is as good as you would expect at any team in the country. And we talk a lot about recruiting, but kind of looking ahead, just as a indicator on how much this staff has come, just in terms of getting the good players, getting the highly ranked players on campus. Oklahoma leads for five-star kids on the defensive side of the ball in 2022 recruiting. So obviously they're not going to land all of those, but at this point, to be in the conversation at these different levels from a defensive tackle perspective, a linebacker, a safety, you're in that conversation, and at this point you lead, and from a crystal ball perspective, you lead five-star defense. It just kind of points to how Grinch has been able to change that culture along with the defensive staff and be able to recruit and know that a lot of times the moniker at Oklahoma, or necessarily the Big 12, is some of the great defensive players didn't want to come to Oklahoma, or they didn't want to play in the Big 12 just because of being a pass-happy league. But I think not only Oklahoma, but as good as defensive Iowa State played last year, and just the conference just in general has started to play a little bit better defense. So I think that moniker is being turned around a little bit, knowing that you can still put players in the NFL, you can still be All-American, you can still win championships in the Big 12. I think that it's turning those tables around in the conversation a little bit differently for Oklahoma.
Despite their issues in the win-loss column not meeting expectations, Texas has at times fielded some near-dominant defenses in the last 5 to 6 years. I thought Oklahoma State, before they took that November slide, I thought they were playing great defense for the most part. West Virginia led the nation in pass defense last year. Now, some of that might speak to opponent and so forth, but still, if you're number one in the nation in pass defense, you're probably one of the top 10 to 15 pass defenses in the nation. So the Big 12, again, we've had this conversation. If you just take away the names and look at the scores from the last couple seasons, you're not going to be able to tell a difference between the Big 12 and the other major conferences in college football. So the defense has been upgraded and brought down the offensive statistics, no question about that.